The 2-week spring break is over and it's back to business as usual at the Illinois State Capitol. Lawmakers is next.
Lawmakers is brought to you in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and through the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Lawmakers. I'm Mark McDonald at the Illinois State Capitol on the rail between the Senate chambers on my right and the House chambers on my left. It's been 2 weeks since there's been session here, and I'm willing to bet that during that 2 weeks our legislators heard an earful from their constituents. Join me now, Representative Rich Brauer from Petersburg and Representative Raymond Poe from Springfield. I was going to lead off this segment by saying, Raymond, that I'll bet the two of you heard a lot from your constituents during the spring break, but I already heard from you that there wasn't a whole lot, they weren't all upset about anything.
Well, or maybe everything. And it's everywhere from, they work for different agencies and especially some of the charitable leaders we have, and they're not getting paid on time. We're hearing some of that. The pension was a little bit, but it doesn't affect current employees. It affects new employees. And then all of our service organizations are in, and they're concerned about getting it back in the budget for next year.
Well, we're going to talk about the budget, but I would have just thought that I sort of sense that at this time, and both on the federal level and the state, federal, and the local level, where none of the governmental entities seem to have enough money to get through a fiscal year, that they'd be fit to be tied, but you're not sensing that.
Well, like I said, they are and they aren't. Right now, it seems like they're more concerned about the federal level. They're still digesting this national health care bill that was passed. They're quite concerned about that. If you're around some seniors, they're figuring out that if there's going to be $500 billion worth of cuts, that if they're on Medicare, they're going to lose some other benefits. So that's the kind of things that they're talking about. And a lot of it right now is the focus on the federal level.
Rich, now let's talk about this pension bill, which, as we mentioned, is due to be signed today. It's going to lower the benefits and raise the age at which future state employees can start recovering benefits. Did you vote for it in the House?
No, I didn't. And let me just say that, with a lot of constituents right now, they're very frustrated. And why we didn't have a lot of calls, people are very upset just about the whole affairs of state government. And as you look at what's happened in the last 4 years, Medicaid has doubled from $7 to $15 billion, and that's where a lot of this line items money has gone to. And so when you look at these pensions, that money was taken from pensions over the last decades, and now they're starting to show that effect. And it's really not the benefits that are creating the problem, it's the fact that so much money has been stolen out of them, especially in the last 8 years.
Yeah. Well, there's no question that the last two administrations before Governor Quinn, the retirement, the pensions were somewhat raided to make room for other programs.
Not with Governor Ryan. It was just with Governor.
Did I say Ryan?
Well, you said the last two before Governor Quinn.
I meant the two Blagojevich administrations.
Oh, yes, okay. And so that has been a huge problem. And so when you look at what was taken out, especially that first year, it's just each year it's been over $1 billion, with the first year being $2.7 billion. So it's been a huge raid on those funds, and it's really created a lot of problems, especially when you look at time and interest.
Raymond, the teachers I had heard were particularly irate about this because I guess the teachers, and I mean the unions by that, were concerned that teachers don't want to have to look forward to retiring at 67. That's not anything that they think they can recruit good teachers into the state of Illinois for. Is it a problem?
Absolutely, and I don't think they thought through that some of this thing was run through in probably a 48-hour period. It wasn't thought out. Most of your teachers are vested at the time they're 60 years old, maybe 62. And then if they're you got to remember, teachers are not on Social Security. So if they go ahead and retire at 62, there's going to be a 30% reduction off their total percentage, and they can't live on that. And so I think they forgot if you can hire a younger teacher right out of college for probably half of what an older teacher's making. They more than pays for that at retirement that they would have been on retirement those last few years. And so if they really look at it, it's a wash. And we all got grandchildren and children, and I'm not sure some teachers will want to be 67 years old teaching kindergarten kids. So pretty hard to chase them down now alone when they get that old.
Rich, I've already heard talk about a possible trailer bill to make some changes to the one that's not even signed yet, and I'm talking about this pension bill. Heard anything about that?
Well, I guess I want to restate that it doesn't affect teachers that have a job right now. It will be new hires after, I think it's January 1st next year. So, if you have a contract now, it won't diminish your pension. And to have a two-tier pension system is inherently wrong in my thinking, but really what has happened was that they pushed this through so it would help their bond rating, and they talked about saving $100 million. Now they literally have the next 20, 25 years to bring back some of those benefits when things improve. And I think that's really what you're going to see. Unfortunately, as Representative Poe said, the short term what you're going to see, a lot of these highly qualified teachers will look to a different state, move out of the state after their training, and get a job teaching someplace else. And that's the thing that really concerns me.
Before we leave this topic, maybe we should mention too that one of the items that takes some of the heat off this issue for the two of you is the fact that before this passed and went to the governor for signature, you all made sure that the judges and the Solons in this state were already dealt with in the same fashion as other retirements.
Well, we both voted for it, but we also both voted against this latest pension reform because, my wife taught for 30 years, so I had the ability to see what a 30-year teacher, the frustrations, and really you don't have that energy in your mid-50s as you do in your mid-20s. And I think we want our best teachers teaching, and that's a concern that, if you get a kindergarten teacher in there trying to keep up and she's in her 60s, I don't know anybody that has that much energy.
Now you mentioned the bond rating. Raymond, I want to ask you this. Was it a bad idea to push the legislation through in order to keep our bond rating from going into the bucket? I mean, it does save the state some money.
Well, I think that a lot of organizations had a lot of other ideas how to make this work and it would work just as well without making these drastic cuts. I sit on the pension task force all summer. We had meetings about every week all summer, and instead of taking something that come out of that task force, like I said earlier, they run this through in 48 hours. So it's something that should have spent a little more time in a room negotiating and trying to come up with a better solution. And I do have a trailer bill already introduced, and it was on the changing that age from 67 back to 62.
Okay.
So that's already been filed.
Okay. So a person could retire after 10 years with the state at the age of 62, and he would get some.
Right.
Well, and understand it would certainly be minimal because, just because you've been there for 10 years, you don't have that full retirement. It won't be enough to live on.
No, it'd be 16% after 10 years.
It wouldn't be full, but you'd be eligible for retirement.
But why I did it mostly was on account of those people that go to work for the state at 20, 22 years old, or a teacher, 20, 22 years old. They have 40 years in time they're 62, and I think they deserve a retirement and not a penalty for retiring early.
Let's move on to the budget. Governor Quinn has not, as far as I know, has not backed off his stance that a 1% increase in the state income tax is a necessity. And I've heard that he's been working members of the House to try to get them to see it otherwise. Have you been worked?
Yeah, we all had that was before a break. We all went down and had our personal meetings, and the trouble of it is there's a lot of things before a tax increase can happen. They want us to participate in the tax increase, but as Republicans, they don't want us to participate in how we're going to divvy the money out and spend it. And then, in other words, does it go to education, does it go to seniors, some of our other service agencies? We need to know how those are going to be covered. And so I don't know how we can go about being for something and then as soon as it passes, cut out of the process. So we want to be a part of the total process, not just the part that they don't want to take the heat over.
Rich, let me ask you too, did somebody from the governor's office try to work you and try to get you to see it their way?
Well, that's right, and we certainly appreciate the fact that Governor Quinn's more involved in the process than what the previous administration. but it's frustrating. And again, we'll talk about Medicaid. That's gone from 7 to 15 billion in 4 years. They went from poverty rate of 21,000 to 4 times poverty rate. So there's people making $80,000 that qualified it, but they did 2 things. They did away with their fraud investigation, $15 billion line item, no fraud investigation. And they also went from an active determinant to a passive, which you had to jump the hurdles, clear that, make sure you were eligible, then re-enroll every year. Well, now they send you a letter, and if you don't respond, you're automatically re-enrolled. And those 2 things with that huge increase is wrong. And if we take care of that first, then we won't need near the tax increase.
Raymond, let me ask you, what was the process like? How, did they invite you to the governor's office? Did some staffer come to your office? How did that work?
They actually, when we were in the station on the House floor, they sent a staffer up and wanted to know if we wanted to visit with the governor, and we went down. And it was just one staffer and the governor and you, and he was very open to different ideas, you know, like job creation was one that I talked to him about. Another, we got to make some cuts. We got to have some reforms, and reforms like Rich was talking about in the Medicaid formulas and some of those kind of things. And I told him after all that, then a temporary income tax, we need to look at it and see what we really need, but we need to make these other changes first.
Let me ask you too, Speaker Madigan did not want to get involved with this last budget year because he wanted some of the Republicans on board because I don't think he wanted the Democrats to own this thing all by themselves. How many of you getting on board do you think it would take for him to go ahead and try to pass the tax increase bill? What do you think, Raymond?
Well, we've heard the numbers 8, but we don't know that, and I think it all boils back down to what I was trying to talk about a little bit earlier. You won't be part of the process on both sides of this. We want to talk about Medicaid reform. You know, we want to talk about managed care for Medicaid. We want to talk about jobs bills, and so that's where we got to start first. And we get that all ironed out, and then we'll see about the temporary increase and go on.
If Speaker Madigan could get 8 Republicans, would he move the bill, Rich? Is that
what I think he would, but as Representative Poe said, you know, we haven't been part of the process. And, you know, it's frustrating because they want us to vote for the increase, but again, on the other side, on some of these priorities, they're not interested in our input. And as soon as that happens, I think you'll see a lot more cooperation because it's important that it is a process, not just one vote.
Okay, so the governor has called both of you in. Has the speaker wanted
No.
to talk to you? He
No.
hasn't. Has the speaker wanted to talk to you?
No.
Would that seem like a likely starting place?
Yes.
Well, I don't think he even talks to our leaders, so I think that would probably be the starting point, talk to our leadership, and then filter down and talk to the rest of us.
Let me ask you, what I have read is that the reason the Republicans don't want to play in this particular bill is because they want to have a say in what spending cuts are going to happen, and they want to have a say in what reforms are going to occur. Give me an example, Raymond, if you would, about what spending cuts you would see as acceptable and what reforms you'd like to see.
Well, one of them would be cut Medicaid from 80,000 back down to 40. That'd eliminate a lot of it. Then also I'd like to see jobs bills. Something out there. They signed one yesterday, but it's a limited jobs bill because there's only $50 million in that. We should have no limit on job bills. We ought to create all the jobs we can.
Well, again, I mean, you look at some of the cuts they've made. I had the county fairs in. They've got a 34% cut. Extension's got huge cuts. Soil and Water's got huge cuts. The Gateway Foundation that helps people get off their life of drugs and alcohol had a 10% cut. So there's a lot of these huge cuts, and we need to look at a jobs bill. We need to look at that reform. You know, I've already talked about Medicaid. I mean, that Medicaid line item is our whole problem with this state right now. And so we need to look at those sort of reforms and then, you know, talk about.
Do you agree with the amount of the cuts? You just want to see different agencies and different causes cut. Is that your?
Oh no, I'm saying some of these are very good agencies. Agriculture, they looking at $2 million fee increase on some of their licenses. Mm-hmm. That money was taken out of agriculture and put into a different line item. And I guess I'm saying these are too important to cut like that. To have our vote, they need to have those back in place, and then we look at some of the huge cuts. You know, at $8 billion in Medicaid. I mean, look how many different line items that would fund, and a job creation, the capital bill. That's the sort of things that we need to be talking about.
And so, just so I'm clear here, if you two could get an audience and some agreement on these issues, you could back a 1% income tax increase?
In that order. It has. We need to have all these other things in place so we know where that tax increase would be going.
I don't think there's such thing as a wonderful tax increase. I think you look at the services the state has to provide and really their priorities, and right now they're just not in line with what needs to be out there.
I want to thank both of you for coming over. I know you had committee meetings, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
That's Representative Brauer and Poe, and we'll be back in just a moment with some other guests. Welcome back to Lawmakers. Back now at the state capitol between the Senate chambers and the House chambers. I'm joined by two House members again. Representative Jil Tracy from Mount Sterling. Thanks, Jill, for being here. And Bob Flider from Decatur. Thank you so much.
Good to be here, Mark.
We had two Republicans on before. It's nice to have members of a different side of the aisle to talk about this. And I started out the beginning of the program talking about what happened in the 2 weeks. Jill, I want to start with you. While you were on spring break, what was your sense of the attitude of your constituents about state government while you were off?
A huge amount of general dissatisfaction and frustration with why is the state so broke and what are we going to do about it, and how soon are we going to do something about it. So, I tried to go through the process with them of how I thought we could best address it, and that was pretty much what I experienced.
Mm-hmm. General discontent, would you say? Or was there an issue that they were really honing in on?
The unpaid bills, and that the state is broke and it's causing it to malfunction, and how are we going to get out of this? And I hear over and over, it's overspending that they are concerned about. That they, I live, my constituent would say, I live within my means. If within my budget or my income's down, I cut back. Why can't you do that in the state? And we walked through that, and personally, I agree with that philosophy. And so we would discuss that, and that was the general consensus of what I experienced.
Yeah. Bob, it's difficult in this day and time when we're talking, everybody's talking about a tax increase. It's very difficult sell, isn't it?
Well, it is, and actually I've had a number of constituents say to me, well, I don't know how we're going to work our way out of this without some kind of a tax increase. And my response to them is that, well, that's absolutely the last resort. And when you walk them through some of the things that we can do as a legislature, that it's just difficult to get past here. But you look at the pension reforms that we passed a few weeks back that are going to save over $100 billion over the next 35 years. That's going to free up dollars that are going to help us meet our obligations in the future. And I think people are also understanding that there are a number of skyrocketing costs that the state has that are rising faster than the revenues are coming in, and until you can bring down that cost curve, any kind of a revenue increase is just going to be like throwing money out the window. So we need to bring our costs down, and we need to do it structurally on a permanent basis. So actually, I think people are being very constructive. They're trying to offer solutions. They want to know what they could do. They have some ideas, and I think there's a recognition that we just are living in a difficult economy, and we have to work together to work our way out of it. What I do think people are frustrated about is the politics over here, and not working together, and that's what we need to do.
Joe, Bob mentioned the changes in the pension system that the governor's soon going to sign into law. Did you heard from people who really thought they may have had some misconceptions about that, but they thought it was going to apply to them because they already worked as a teacher or for the state? You had to clarify for them what the situation was.
There was, don't mess with my pension, and then you go through the process of explaining it. We didn't change existing pensions, and I do not favor even thinking about changing existing pensions, but just current one, new hires, and going through that. And then you'll hear from a lot of workers, well, I think that'll hurt a future generation of workers in some fashion, and I respectfully disagree with them, and we go through a process of why I do not think it will, you'll have generations living longer, and the reason they go into a given profession isn't guided by the end result of a pension. So we go through that, but going with what Bob says, it will save a lot of money. I have been clamoring that we have to reform the way government has been done, and this was a start. I thought, it was not a perfect bill as far, it had some elements of it that I wouldn't have supported if they stood alone, but overall, I thought that we needed to reform many areas, and this was one.
And you voted for it?
I did.
And Bob, did you vote for it?
I did.
Okay.
Yes, I supported it.
So one positive thing is it probably did save us from losing some points in our bond rating. I would assume that it saved some money.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
In fact, it was almost an immediate effect. I think within days, the state's bond rating was reaffirmed, and the state was able to save those bonds, saving millions of dollars. And that was one of the driving forces behind the need to do this.
Right, and I heard repeatedly, well, if you had been funding those properly over the years, we wouldn't have this horrendous snowball of
that's
a
for
pension
sure.
obligation and non-payment of it and unfunded. And my response was, I wasn't here particularly, I was not here that time. Can't do anything about that now except try to make it up. It's going to be a snowball that is insurmountable. So we, given that was a wrong process, and I fully support funding pension obligations each year as they're supposed to be done. We've had formulas in the past, and sticking to that formula, I believe, is good fiscal policy.
The House recently passed a bill which allows public schools to go 4-day school weeks if they choose to do so. What do you think about that?
I supported that bill just because I understand, and that particular school district has a very large transportation cost, and I think it represented a huge amount of their total budget, and they wanted that option. I believe in local governmental control of the schools and giving them flexibility to determine what works within their system. And it wouldn't be an easy decision to go to a 4-day, but I believe it was right to give them that option within their own district to look at how it would serve their people best.
What about you, Bob?
I voted for it as well. I was contacted by one school district who thought it would be a good option to have. And I don't think it's necessarily for everybody or for every school district, but certainly, I try and do my best to give local governments a degree of control. And if they think that's what's best for them, and their parents and teachers think that would be appropriate for them as a way to provide a better education and save money, then let's let them give it a shot.
I had heard from pre-K folks as well that they thought saving a transportation cost of 1 day might be able to save their program and still keep the pre-K programs in some of the areas. So they just wanted the flexibility. It's not going to work in most of the situations, but it's flexibility.
Well, one reaction I heard, and of course there's always a negative reaction to whatever you do, but is okay, here they are, they can't pay their obligations to the school districts, so they're just going to have them cut back to 4 days.
Yeah.
And that wasn't it at all.
I think it was the idea. The idea came from one of the school districts in actually Representative Black's district. So it wasn't something that somebody cooked up here.
Right. No, I mean, certainly we got to fund. I want the schools to get the money that's been promised to them as quickly as possible, and we're working on that as best we can. It's a situation of, as the revenue comes in, then it will be dispersed.
Representative Poe and Brauer told me that their opinion was if House Speaker Madigan could get 8 Republicans to vote in favor of an income tax increase, then he would pursue that bill. Has the governor's office been working you, Jill, to get your
Not
vote?
me personally. I think I've been very clear that I do not favor a tax increase. My constituents overall do not favor a tax increase. If I hear from one that says, I'd be willing to pay more taxes if you fund something, and I said, I hear you, but I can't give you that guarantee because you've seen where you've given more revenue and it's not gone for a particular program. Instead, we may increase the program or just keep overspending. So they want to. My response to that is, I don't think we'll see 8 votes of any sort, because the reason he would want that is because his own party is facing the same constituents that don't favor a tax increase. They've seen how we've overspent, so how can we show that we can be fiscally responsible with any new revenue without showing how we can reform first and pay our bills on time with what we've got?
Bob, the governor's not going to let this one go, as I understand it. He's going to continue to pursue this 1% income tax increase. And the Senate, of course, already has a bill passed last year to go ahead and approve it. Do you see it happening in the House?
I don't.
You don't?
I don't see it. I don't see the votes on the Democrat side for it. A lot of people often say, well, Speaker controls the House. He has majority of Democrats. Why doesn't he just pass it? Well, the fact of the matter is he's listened to his members, and there's not enough votes for it. And so unless you have a bipartisan solution, he's saying we're not going to go it alone. I'm not going to go around and twist somebody's arm who doesn't feel like they should vote for it. And really, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about how things often operate in the House. But the fact of the matter is there just isn't the support on the Democrat side to do it. And I don't see it happening unless the two parties come together, and it's probably just not going to happen.
Let's get away from dollars and cents for a minute and talk about another issue. Representative Lou Lang, I hear, is trolling in the House for votes for a medical marijuana bill. Senate has already passed one and is looking for votes. Where do you stand on that?
I do not support it. I've heard from a few constituents that think it would be a good idea. However, I've studied the issue quite a bit, and I just have seen how it's operated in California and Colorado. I have my children live in Colorado, and I've seen that where you've got more medical marijuana franchises than you do Starbucks, and the average age is about 20 for a person receiving a prescription. I think that is kind of telltale that it doesn't really work.
So you think it's being abused?
I do think it's fraught with abuse, and I do think that people that are genuinely suffering have good alternatives to getting the suffering relieved through existing controlled methods. So no, I do not support it. My area doesn't. I heard from my local sheriff the other day that he just said, please, that it's so difficult to enforce what we have now, and he didn't want to allow that. And I had an interesting flyer that the shooter at the Pentagon recently was on medical marijuana. So I mean, it's just fraught with abuse, I think it could be.
Bob, can Lou Lang get you interested in that bill?
Well, like a lot of people, I've had people in my family suffer from cancer, and I would want to do everything I possibly can to help them alleviate their pain and suffering and make it easier on them. But at the same time, I feel like there are alternatives, and I feel like the FDA regulates medicine and prescription drugs, and this would be a direct bypass. I've heard nothing but opposition from the law enforcement community in my district, from the 3 sheriffs that are in my district and from the police chiefs. They haven't changed their tune. I got a call from the Shelby County Sheriff just yesterday and concerned about it, and so I share the same concerns they do. I think it ought to be regulated at the federal level. I don't think the state should supersede any federal guidelines.
Okay, real quickly, and this is an easy one. What do you think the odds are, Jill, of getting the adjournment date of May 7th?
I would like to go full-time till we get a great budget, but I hear the rumblings that we will be out then, and I'm afraid we won't have a great budget.
Okay, so
That's my concern.
you think they'll make the 7th and it will not be probably a good thing?
In my opinion, no.
Okay.
I would be here till December if we could get a fully balanced budget.
May 7th, Bob, what do you think?
Well, I keep hearing that over and over again. I haven't heard it from an official source necessarily, but it's definitely making the rumor mill around here. It strikes me that we should be able to pass a budget sooner rather than later. I hope we'll be able to put it out for public review. People can see it, make their comments on it, and let us know what their thoughts are. And quite frankly, I think the way things are shaping up here, it's probably going to be one party supporting the budget and the other party not necessarily supporting the budget. But I feel like Jill, I feel like this should not be the end if we pass a budget. I think we should be back monthly or quarterly or whatever it takes to review the revenues, review the expenditures, continue to do the work that people have elected us to do. I think it's problematic when we pass a budget, we'll say we'll see in a year. That's just a mistake. We shouldn't be doing it that way. I think we should always be reviewing it, and if we pass a budget with that in mind, then hopefully we'll be able to fine-tune it and refine it in the future.
We could turn this around. We really could. And I mean, we have to. And I think we need to put all of the possible components in place so we can turn the budget process around.
Well, thank you. Jil Tracy, Bob Flider, thanks for coming by.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, that's it for this edition of Lawmakers, but when we come back to you next month, it's past the May 7th date, and we'll see whether adjournment was possible, and we'll wrap it up then. With another Lawmakers, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Lawmakers is brought to you in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and through the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.